The Galactic Empire, a union of thousands of alien civilizations spread across the stars, finally turned its attention to a small blue planet on the edge of the Orion Arm Earth. A silent probe was sent to orbit the planet, scan its surface, and classify the world using ancient threat analysis protocols. The probe watched quietly for months, recording human wars, their aging satellites, the messy internet traffic, and divided nations. After all its observations, the report was brief. Earth species, human tech level, low social. Unity, fractured, threat level, minimal. With that, Earth was labeled as low threat. Not worth attention, not dangerous enough to watch closely, and not advanced enough to matter. The probe was left in orbit, forgotten by most in the Empire. But on Earth, something strange happened. Deep in a remote lab in Iceland, a small team of researchers led by Dr. Amina Rao detected an anomaly in the radio spectrum, something that didn't match natural sources or any known satellite. The signal came at regular intervals, in pulses, too precise to be natural, with patterns resembling language. Amina, a quiet but brilliant astrophysicist who had lost her family in a tragic earthquake years ago, had dedicated her life to finding signs of life beyond Earth. She wasn't looking for proof. To tell the world she was looking for something to believe in again. When her team began decoding the pulses, they found compressed data fragments with strange star maps and lines of alien code. At first it seemed like noise, but soon they cracked the structure and discovered the probe's logs. What they read shook them. It was a surveillance report on humanity, a list of their flaws, fears, and failures, written in a cold, mechanical tone. It called Earth a primitive world, full of chaos and emotion, unable to unite or advance. The tone was not angry, it was dismissive. The humans were not feared, they were pitied. Amina felt something stir in her chest, not anger, but quiet resolve. "They think we're nothing," she said, staring at the data. "Let's show them what that means." She and her team secretly began building a communication system inspired by the probe's design. They didn't tell any government or space agency. They worked in silence, using what little information they had to reverse engineer the probe's tech. Months passed, and while the world carried on in ignorance, Amina's team made progress. One night, while running a new test using modified quantum interference patterns, the device responded, not with noise, but with silence. The probe, which had been transmitting signals back to its empire for years, stopped. Somewhere across the galaxy, a red light blinked in the Empire's data network. The Earth probe had gone silent. At first, alien officials assumed it had failed due to age or damage. But then, within days, other monitoring stations near Earth also stopped sending signals. It was too soon to panic. Earth was low threat, after all, but something didn't feel right. Meanwhile, Amina sat alone in the lab, staring at the night sky through a cracked window. She didn't know what they had triggered. She only knew that something had changed. The silence wasn't empty. It was waiting. And in that silence, humanity's story was just beginning. Far across the stars, deep inside the command center of the Galactic Empire, red lights flickered as automated systems tried again and again to reach the Earth probe, but every signal bounced back without response, which was strange for a device that had operated without fault for years. And although Earth was labeled as low threat, The silence felt wrong, too sudden, too complete, and the Empire's curiosity slowly turned into concern. When nearby relay beacons around the solar system also stopped replying, as if something was blocking or erasing their presence altogether, and while some dismissed it as a chain of technical failures, others within the high councils whispered old legends about signal dead zones, rare places where data simply vanished, and so the Empire sent a small recon ship, the Verrex, piloted by a cautious alien commander named Trellin, whose orders were simple: scan Earth, locate the probe, and return quickly. But as the Verrex approached the edge of Earth's orbit, its logs showed rising interference, ghost signals bouncing from nowhere, and shadows appearing where nothing existed, until the ship's feed cut off mid-transmission, its final message being one word: run, and then silence again, deep and complete, just like before. And on Earth, Dr. Amina Rao stood in the lab, staring at her equipment, which had suddenly lit up with strange readings she didn't understand, as if the sky itself had changed its rules, and her communication device picked up a trace of something not human, and not from the probe, something new and chaotic, like voices trying to speak all at once in a forgotten language. And while others in her team panicked, Amina remained still, listening carefully, feeling the quiet between the static as if it were alive. And far above Earth, strange clouds formed. Near the poles, glowing with colors never seen before, green and red lightning that danced across the sky without storms. And then the northern lights shifted into solid crimson, spreading unnaturally across the horizon, seen even in daylight, and the world took notice, with news channels flooding with theories, from solar flares to top-secret weapons. But no one truly knew what was happening, not even Amina, though she had a feeling it had something to do with what they had activated weeks ago, because the timing was too perfect, and the silence from space too loud to ignore, and she began to dream not simple dreams, but vivid ones where she floated through space, saw strange cities covered in dust, and alien eyes filled with fear. And in every dream, a voice whispered the same thing: they are not watching anymore. And when she woke, she checked the frequencies again, and found a short pulse, just 1 second of signal. And inside it was the same data fragment from the Verrex, the word run encoded in galactic script. And though no one else on Earth could read it, Amina understood, and her team grew quiet, unsure if they had brought danger or revealed something buried. And as governments began noticing odd changes in satellite behavior, and strange shadows flickering in the corners of telescope footage, Amina made a decision not to shut the system down, but to strengthen it, to dig deeper, because the silence was not empty, it was hiding something. And in space, the Empire hesitated, no longer laughing at Earth's low threat status, but fearing what could silence not one, but 5 systems near a primitive world. And though no enemy ships were seen and no weapons were fired, something far more terrifying had happened. Earth had become unreadable, unpredictable, and the machines built to observe it were now afraid to listen. And back on Earth, Amina opened her notebook and wrote 3 questions. What did they see? What have we awakened? What if we were never alone? And as she closed the notebook, the skies outside her lab flashed again, not with light, but with shapes in possible patterns formed in the clouds, as if someone or something was answering. Her back. The world changed the day the sky stayed red, not just at night, but even under the bright sun, and people across Earth stood in streets, fields, and rooftops, staring at the crimson light above. Then, unsure if they were witnessing a natural wonder or the beginning of something else, something stranger than any storm or eclipse. And in the middle of this growing fear, Dr. Amina Rao sat in her lab, eyes locked on her device that now hummed, with constant energy, as if it had awakened from a deep sleep. And when she touched the console, it responded faster than before, unlocking a flood of new signals, some in patterns, some in musical tones, and others like short bursts of emotion. Pushed into sound, and as she listened, Amina began to hear more than just code. She heard memories, voices crying and laughing at the same time, and strange echoes of places she had never seen. And it wasn't just her. People around the world started having dreams that were not theirs, seeing broken cities, silver towers, sinking into black soil, and lights in the sky forming circles that pulsed like heartbeats. And soon scientists everywhere reported malfunctions in their instruments, especially anything sensitive to electromagnetic waves, because something was now interfering with the air itself, as if space had curled inward. And then came the real. Shock satellites that had gone silent weeks earlier returned, not with live data, but with corrupted files full of images that changed every time someone looked at them. And among those images was one that Amina's team managed to stabilize, a snapshot from the alien ship Virex before it vanished. It showed Earth from orbit, but the planet was surrounded by a faint sphere of flickering shapes, not solid, not made of matter, but something else, something alive. And then the device in Amina's lab pulsed 3 times and released a new fragment of data, this one decoded into galactic standard, showing the symbol for psychic contagion, a rare warning used only in ancient times when civilizations encountered something that altered their minds just by being near it, and fear spread quickly through the empire as they reviewed the message. Because this meant that Earth was not just dangerous, it was affecting technology and biology with no weapons, no invasion, no signals sent on purpose, and the Council held secret meetings, unsure whether to block Earth entirely or try to make contact before the effect spread, but no one dared send another ship. And back on Earth, Amina sat quietly, realizing that something about humanity had touched the fabric of space in a way no one understood. Not even the aliens who called themselves advanced, because emotion, pain, love, music, and loss, all those things humans carried, were not just parts of life. They were forces, and those forces had shaped Earth into a world with a frequency that disrupted the order of the stars. And as Amina tested more of the incoming signals, she began to pick out pieces of a story, like an ancient history being told backwards, showing the rise of a powerful race long gone, who once tried to guide the galaxy but failed. And in the end they left behind tools and warnings, hoping someone would understand one day. And now Earth, by accident or destiny, had found one of those tools, the probe, and triggered a reaction, not of war, but of awakening. And as more people shared the same dreams and visions, Amina started to map them on a global scale, realizing they formed a message that spanned continents, drawn in the minds of millions. And though most did not understand what they saw, the pattern was spreading, not like a virus, but like music remembered from childhood. And that night, when Amina closed her eyes, she dreamed again, only this time the voice was clearer, and it said, "You are not a threat. You are the key." And when she woke up, her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the realization that Earth was never meant to be silent, never meant to be small, and that somewhere, hidden in their chaos, humans carried something the galaxy had long forgotten, something the machines could not measure, and logic could not contain, and now that it had been heard, it could not be unheard, because the signal wasn't a warning, it was an invitation. Amina stood alone on the icy plains of the Arctic, her breath clouding in the cold air as she stared at the frozen ground beneath her boots, knowing deep inside that something ancient was waiting below, something not made by humans, but also not made by the Empire. And she had come here because the dreams had led her. Every image and whisper pointing to this exact place, far from cities, far from noise, where the red sky above flickered with strange symbols only visible to those who had touched the signal. And when she placed her hand on the snowy surface, the ground vibrated gently, as if it remembered her, and the snow began to melt in a perfect circle, revealing stone smooth, dark, and warm to the touch despite the freezing air. And as she watched, a hidden platform rose from the ice, humming softly like it had been waiting for ages, and without fear Amina stepped onto it, and the platform sank slowly, carrying her into the earth, into a deep chamber filled with glowing walls and patterns that danced when she passed, like they recognized her thoughts. And at the center stood a tall structure, shaped like a heart, but not made of flesh, pulsing with light that changed color with her emotions. And when she reached out, the lights surrounded her, pulling her mind into another place, a space between moments, where time slowed and voices echoed from long ago, telling the story of an old race that once walked the stars, not with ships or weapons, but with thought and feeling, a race that understood the power of connection. And this heart was there, gift a living memory left behind for those strong enough to feel it, not just see it. And Amina saw everything in an instant, a galaxy once full of wonder, slowly turning cold as reason replaced emotion, as machines silenced music, as order erased chaos. And in that silence, the heart had been buried, hidden on a planet still young and full of noise, a planet that would one day grow into the answer the old ones had hoped for, and Earth was that answer, not because of its strength or speed, but because of its ability to feel, to dream, to fall and rise again. And Amina was not chosen by chance, she was simply open enough to listen, and when the vision faded, she was back in the chamber, but not alone. For the heart was now awake, its light pulsing in time with her heartbeat, and the device she had carried for months began to glow as well, syncing with the ancient machine, creating a new signal that rose into the sky like a beacon and a cross. The world, those who had been touched by the dreams, felt it too, something deep in their chest, a warmth, a call, and in space, systems that had gone silent blinked back to life, not because they had been fixed, but because something inside them had changed, something small and soft that had no shape but great power, and the Empire, watching from afar, could no longer deny the truth. Earth had not gone dark, it had gone deep, reaching into the fabric of reality not with science, but with soul. And Amina walked back to the surface as the snowstorm cleared and the clouds opened, revealing a sky no longer red but full of moving light, like the stars themselves were breathing. And she knew the heart had not just shared memories, it had passed a message. one that could not be spoken, only lived, and it was now inside her, inside Earth, and soon inside the galaxy, not as a threat, but as a beginning. High above Earth, beyond the reach of its sky and silence, the Galactic Council gathered in a vast chamber made of crystal and thought, its walls reflecting the worry of 1,000 voices as they stared at the latest report, a pulse from the heart of Earth, steady, strange, and unlike anything their instruments had ever recorded, and though they had once called Earth low, threat, now they spoke in whispers, wondering if it was not a threat at all, but a shift, a crack in the logic that held their empire together. And while some demanded to isolate the planet forever, others were curious, drawn to the quiet. Power that had somehow reached across space without a weapon, without a fleet, only a signal of feeling. And then came a new voice, clear and unexpected, broadcast through the deep link communication grid used only for emergencies. And it came not from the Empire, but from Earth, spoken in the galactic standard, translated not by machines, but by the heart itself, and every screen across the council chambers lit up with the image of a human woman standing on a snowy cliff, her hair blowing in the wind, her eyes calm and full of something the council could not name. And it was Amina, her voice steady and warm as she said, "I don't speak for all humans, but I speak from what we are." And she told them Earth's story, not the wars, not the failures, but the parts they never saw, the quiet hands building. After storms, the songs sung at funerals, the laughter of children who knew nothing of borders. And as she spoke, her voice carried more than words. It carried memories, hope, and a deep understanding that life was not made to be perfect, but to be lived, felt, and shared. And her message wasn't a threat. It was a truth. The galaxy had grown silent, not because of peace, but because it had forgotten how to listen. And now Earth had reminded them, not with machines, but with meaning, and one by one the council chambers grew quiet, not in fear, but in reflection. For they had not expected such a voice from such a world, and in that silence change began. First in small ways systems once cold with calculation allowed music to be heard. Worlds that banned emotion now opened schools for art, and ambassadors were sent not to conquer, but to connect, and Earth, once ignored, was now called Seed World, not because it held power, but because it sparked it in others, and Amina, still walking the same Earth she had always loved, became its first speaker to the stars. Not a ruler, not a hero, just a voice, honest and full of the one thing the galaxy had been missing, heart. And in the years that followed, children on distant planets grew up learning her story, not as a tale of power, but as a reminder that sometimes the smallest voice, from the quietest place, can wake the entire universe. Threat, now they spoke in whispers, wondering if it was not a threat at all, but a shift, a crack in the logic that held their empire together. And while some demanded to isolate the planet forever, others were curious, drawn to the quiet. Power that had somehow reached across space without a weapon, without a fleet, only a signal of feeling. And then came a new voice, clear and unexpected, broadcast through the deep link communication grid used only for emergencies. And it came not from the Empire, but from Earth, spoken in the galactic standard, translated not by machines, but by the heart itself. And every screen across the council chambers lit up with the image of a human woman standing on a snowy cliff, her hair blowing in the wind, her eyes calm and full of something the council could not name. And it was Amina, her voice steady and warm as she said, "I don't speak for all humans, but I speak from what we are." And she told them Earth's story, not the wars, not the failures, but the parts they never saw, the quiet hands building. After storms, the songs sung at funerals, the laughter of children who knew nothing of borders. And as she spoke, her voice carried more than words. It carried memories, hope, and a deep understanding that life was not made to be perfect, but to be lived, felt, and shared. And her message wasn't a threat. It was a truth. The galaxy had grown silent, not because of peace, but because it had forgotten how to listen. And now Earth had reminded them, not with machines, but with meaning, and one by one the council chambers grew quiet, not in fear, but in reflection. For they had not expected such a voice from such a world, and in that silence change began. First in small ways systems once cold with calculation allowed music to be heard. Worlds that banned emotion now opened schools for art, and ambassadors were sent not to conquer, but to connect, and Earth, once ignored, was now called Seed World, not because it held power, but because it sparked it in others, and Amina, still walking the same Earth she had always loved, became its first speaker to the stars. Not a ruler, not a hero, just a voice, honest and full of the one thing the galaxy had been missing, heart. And in the years that followed, children on distant planets grew up learning her story, not as a tale of power, but as a reminder that sometimes the smallest voice, from the quietest place, can wake the entire universe.